Welcome back to Psychological Depth. In today's episode, we'll be diving into the topic, why height really matters in dating. 6 feet. That number appears in more female dating profiles than any other specific requirement. Not kind, not ambitious, not emotionally available. 6 feet. A measurement, a threshold that eliminates roughly 85% of men before a single word gets exchanged. Before personality enters consideration, before achievement, humor, intelligence, or compatibility have any opportunity to register. The number functions as a filter, a sorting mechanism that operates before the actual selection process begins. And millions of men, good men, capable men, men who would make excellent partners, get discarded into the rejection pile based on a characteristic they cannot control. Did not choose and cannot change regardless of effort or desire. Height matters. Anyone who claims otherwise is either lying, naive, or has never watched how women's attention shifts when a tall man enters a room. The bias operates constantly, unconsciously and powerfully enough to override factors that should matter more. This is reality. Pretending otherwise helps no one. But reality contains more than the disadvantage. Reality also contains paths through it. Strategies that work, compensations that equalize, approaches that allow shorter men to compete effectively despite starting with a structural handicap. The disadvantage is real. It's also not fatal. And understanding both truths, the obstacle, and the ways around it, separates men who succeed from men who marinate in resentment while opportunities pass them by. This conversation requires honesty that most discussions of height avoid. The disadvantage will be stated clearly. The advantages tall men enjoy will be acknowledged without minimization. And then only then the actual strategies for competing effectively will be examined. Because strategies built on denial fail. Only strategies built on accurate assessment of the terrain produce results. The bias operates deeper than most people recognize. Height triggers assumptions that have nothing to do with height itself. Tall men are perceived as more competent before demonstrating competence. More confident before displaying confidence. More leaderica before leading anything. The halo effect, where one positive attribute creates assumptions of other positive attributes, operates powerfully around height. Research confirms what observation suggests. Taller men earn more money on average. They're promoted faster. They're elected to leadership positions more frequently. They're rated as more attractive in studies that control for other variables. The premium attached to height extends far beyond dating into career advancement, social perception, and general life outcomes. None of this is earned. The tall man didn't do anything to be tall. He received genetic lottery results that happen to align with deep-seated psychological preferences. Preferences that may be evolutionary, may be cultural, or probably both. He walks into rooms carrying an advantage he never worked for, and that advantage compounds throughout his life. In dating specifically, the advantage becomes stark. Women express height preferences with unusual directness. Must be 6 feet appears in profiles with frequency that would be considered offensive if applied to female characteristics. The preference is stated openly because it's considered acceptable, even reasonable in ways that equivalent male preferences would be condemned. A man listing must weigh under 130 pounds would face social sanction. A woman listing must be over 6 feet faces validation. You deserve what you want. Queen. The asymmetry reveals whose preferences society considers legitimate and whose get policed. The numbers paint the competitive landscape clearly. Approximately 15% of American men are 6 feet or taller. These men receive disproportionate interest from women on dating platforms. Some estimates suggest they receive 60% or more of the female attention despite being a small minority of users. The remaining 85% of men compete for whatever attention remains. Average height men 5 feet 9, 5 feet 10 find themselves functionally invisible despite falling within normal range. Short men face even steeper odds. The distribution of female interest doesn't match the distribution of male height. It clusters dramatically at the top. Dating apps amplify this effect. When selection happens through photos and brief profiles, height becomes a sorting mechanism that operates before anything else matters. She sees his height. If it's below threshold, she swipes left. His career, his personality, his humor, his compatibility with her specifically. None of this gets evaluated. The height filter eliminated him from consideration before consideration began. Men of average height report the experience consistently. Conversations that were going well suddenly die when height comes up. First dates where connection seemed genuine never produced second dates once she stood next to him. The interest was there until the physical reality of his stature registered. Then it vanished. This produces a particular frustration. Being eliminated for characteristics you could theoretically change. Weight, grooming, style at least suggest a path forward. Being eliminated for something unchangeable. Something genetic. Something you had no input in determining that feels different. More final. More fundamentally unfair. 8. The psychological damage accumulates when not processed correctly. Shorter men who focus on the unfairness develop bitterness that becomes visible. The resentment shows in their energy, their conversation, their presence. Women detect it instantly and reject it. Not because of the height itself, but because of what the height has produced psychologically. The disadvantage creates the wound. The wound creates the bitterness. The bitterness creates additional rejection. The cycle reinforces itself. Envy of tall men compounds the problem. Watching someone receive advantages they didn't earn triggers something primal. The tall man at the bar who gets approached while you get ignored. The tall colleague who gets promoted despite equivalent performance. The tall friend whose dating success comes with apparent effortlessness. Each observation deposits more resentment. 9. This envy is understandable. The unfairness is real. But understandable doesn't mean useful. The resentment doesn't shrink tall men or grow shorter ones. It just poisons the resenter while the advantage remain unaffected. The energy spent cataloging injustice produces nothing except additional misery for the person expending it. Despair represents the endpoint of unprocessed height frustration. The conclusion that nothing can be done. That the game is rigged beyond recovery. That shorter men are simply destined for inferior outcomes. And acceptance of this fate is the only option. This conclusion feels rational but produces paralysis. And paralysis guarantees the negative outcome it predicts. The first requirement is acceptance. Real acceptance. Not pretend. Your height is what it is. No amount of wishing changes it. No surgery adds meaningful inches. No special shoes solve the fundamental issue. The characteristic exists, cannot be changed, and will remain constant for your entire life. This is the starting condition. Denying it wastes energy. Resenting it wastes more energy. Only accepting it frees resources for actual response. Acceptance doesn't mean approval. You don't have to like your height. You don't have to think the bias is fair. You don't have to pretend the disadvantage doesn't exist. Acceptance just means acknowledging what is without continuing to fight against the unchangeable. Dropping the rope in the tug of war against reality. This psychological shift feels like surrender initially. It's actually the opposite. Fighting reality depletes you. Accepting reality conserves resources for fights you can actually win. The energy that was burning uselessly against an immovable object becomes available for moving objects that actually move. Humor helps the processing. The ability to joke about your height. Genuinely joke, not perform jokes, while seething internally, signals that you've integrated the characteristic into your identity without letting it dominate. The short man who can laugh at himself disarms the topic's power. The short man who bristles at any mention keeps the topic charged and central. Perspective provides additional assistance. Height is one factor among many. The research showing its importance also shows it's not the only variable. Plenty of shorter men have successful dating lives. Plenty of tall men struggle despite their advantage. Height influences probabilities but doesn't determine outcomes. The distribution has variance. You can land on the favorable side of variance through optimization of other factors. The controllable factors deserve intense focus. Physical fitness offers the most direct compensation. Shorter men can build visibly impressive physiques more easily than tall men. The same amount of muscle appears more pronounced on a smaller frame. Development becomes visible faster. The aesthetic of dense proportionate strength. A physique that communicates capability and discipline is achievable in less time with less effort. This matters practically. A 5'7" man with a developed physique presents differently than a 5'7" man without one. The shorter stature remains, but the message shifts from small man to powerful man who happens to be compact. The reframe isn't verbal, it's visual. Her perception changes because what she's seeing has changed. The gym becomes a battlefield where shorter men can actually win. Every session builds something. Every week produces visible change. The work has clear returns. Unlike height, which no effort can change, fitness responds to effort directly. The correlation between input and output is nearly 1:1. Style and appearance multiply the effect. Clothing that fits properly, colors that complement, grooming that demonstrates care. Shorter men who dress carelessly communicate that they've given up. Shorter men who dress exceptionally communicate that they understand how to maximize their presentation. The effort itself signals something about their character. Specific style choices help shorter men specifically. Monochromatic outfits create vertical visual continuity. Properly fitted clothes avoid the drowning in fabric look that emphasizes smallness. Elevated shoes add inches without appearing obvious. These aren't tricks. They're optimizations using available tools to present the best possible version. Financial success functions as the great equalizer. Studies have attempted to quantify how much money compensates for height in perceived desirability. The numbers vary but consistently indicate substantial effect. A shorter man with significant income becomes competitive with a taller man of modest income. The financial success rewrites the narrative around him. This isn't gold digger dynamic specifically. The mechanism operates more fundamentally. Wealth signals competence, signals capability, signals that this man can navigate the world effectively enough to acquire resources. These signals counteract the signals that height absence sends. He's short, but he's clearly not incapable. The proof is visible in his circumstances. The practical benefits compound. Money provides access to environments where different selection criteria operate. To activities where height matters less, to lifestyle markers that communicate status through channels height cannot affect. The short man at the expensive restaurant driving the impressive car, living in the desirable neighborhood. His height becomes less central to his overall presentation. Financial focus also provides psychological benefit. Energy flows towards something achievable rather than something impossible. Every dollar earned represents progress. Every career advance demonstrates capability. The building of wealth becomes a project with measurable milestones. Unlike height, which offers no milestones because no movement is possible. Some shorter men report that their height motivated development that might not have occurred otherwise. The obstacle forced effort. The lack of easy advantages required building actual advantages. The rejection that came automatically from height discrimination developed resilience that rejection for other reasons might not have built. Tall men often coast. The advantages they receive without effort reduce motivation to develop other qualities. Why build a fascinating personality when basic social success comes automatically? Why develop professional skills aggressively when promotions arrive through presence alone? The advantage enables complacency. Complacency produces underdevelopment. Shorter men cannot coast. The world doesn't hand them anything. Every success requires earning. Every achievement requires proof. Every relationship requires demonstrating value that tall men are assumed to have. The demanding environment produces demanding responses or produces failure. The filter is brutal, but it selects for genuine development. Many successful shorter men credit their height with forcing the effort that produced their success. Would they have built the business if social validation came easily? Would they have developed the skills if advancement happened automatically? The counterfactual is unknowable, but the pattern appears consistently. Obstacles often produce strengths that ease never would. The psychological strategy requires deliberate construction. Focus must be directed consciously. The natural tendency pulls attention toward the disadvantage, toward noticing every woman who chooses a tall man, toward cataloging every rejection that seems height-related, toward monitoring the unfairness with obsessive precision. This tendency must be overridden deliberately and repeatedly. Attention belongs on controllable factors. On the physique being built. On the career being developed. On the skills being cultivated. On the personality being refined. On the life being constructed. These areas respond to effort. These areas offer return on investment. These areas produce actual improvement rather than refined grievance. Bitterness must be actively resisted. It's easy to slide into. It's socially validated in certain online communities where shorter men gather to confirm each other's hopelessness. It feels righteous because the underlying complaint is legitimate, but it produces nothing less than nothing. It actively harms by making the bitter person less attractive through his bitterness. Confidence requires building on genuine foundations. Not fake confidence that pretends that height doesn't matter, that you don't notice the bias, that everything is fine. Genuine confidence are in the knowledge that you've maximized what you can maximize, that you've built actual value, that your worth isn't reducible to a single physical characteristic even if others sometimes reduce it that way. The dating approach adapts to reality rather than fighting it. Apps that allow height filtering before other characteristics can be seen work against shorter men. Meeting women in contexts where personality can register before height measurement occurs works in their favor. The strategy isn't avoiding dating. It's choosing battlefields where the handicap matters less. Social circle dating offers advantages. When she meets you through friends, she's been pre-validated. When the introduction happens in a context where you're demonstrating capability, leading a project, hosting an event, performing a skill, the first impression includes more than height. The characteristic still exists, but it's embedded in richer information. Activity-based meeting changes initial presentation. The rock climbing gym, the martial arts class, the professional networking event, the volunteer organization. In these contexts, you're encountered while doing something. Your capability is visible. Your presence has reason beyond seeking dates. Height becomes one characteristic among many rather than the first filter applied. Confidence in approach matters more than height when interaction actually happens. The short man who approaches with certainty, engages with humor, demonstrates value through conversation. He outperforms the tall man who approaches with hesitation. Most men don't approach at all. Among those who do, the quality of the approach matters enormously. Rejection must be processed differently when height is involved. Some rejections are about height. Genuinely, directly, specifically about height. She's not interested because you're short. This is real. It happens. Denying it produces confusion about what's actually occurring. The rejections get attributed to height when they're about something else. The convenient explanation, "Yeah, she rejected me because I'm short," sometimes substitutes for harder explanations. Maybe the conversation wasn't interesting. Maybe the approach was awkward. Maybe the compatibility wasn't there. Height provides an easy external attribution that protects ego from examining other possibilities. Distinguishing between these categories matters. Real height rejection should be accepted and moved past quickly. She's not attracted to shorter men. That's her preference. It's not changeable by you. Next, but rejected for other reasons. Misattributed to height prevents learning that would improve future outcomes. If it wasn't actually about height, understanding what it was actually about enables adjustment. The numbers game applies regardless. Dating involves volume. Most approaches don't produce relationships regardless of the man's height. The path to success runs through failure. Lots of failure. Shorter men might face higher rejection rates, requiring more volume to produce equivalent results. This is unfair but workable. Increase volume, increase efficiency, produce equivalent outcomes through greater input. Relationship selection changes when you're not the default choice. Tall men often select from whoever's available since so many are available. Shorter men, having fought harder for each opportunity, often select more carefully. The smaller pool requires better evaluation. The difficulty of attraction makes each match more valuable. The relationship that forms carries different foundation because it required more to establish. Women who choose shorter men, despite the option to choose taller, have already demonstrated something. The height preference, widespread as it is, didn't determine her decision. Something about you specifically overcame the statistical bias. This isn't nothing. It's selection evidence. She saw something worth choosing over the easier path of selecting a tall man who was readily available. The relationships themselves often differ in quality. The woman who rejected height bias to choose you likely made the choice based on characteristics that actually predict relationship success. Personality, compatibility, values, connection. The woman who chose the tall man based primarily on his height may have underweighted these factors. The harder selection path sometimes produces better actual matches. Broader life philosophy emerges from processing height disadvantage correctly. Circumstances are often accidental. Height is genetic randomness. Birth location is geographic randomness. Family wealth is inherited randomness. Much of what determines life outcomes lies outside individual control. This realization can produce despair or liberation depending on how it's processed. Liberation comes from recognizing that uncontrollable factors don't deserve emotional energy. Accept them. Move to what can be influenced. Build within the constraints that exist rather than raging against constraints that won't move. This approach produces results across every domain, not just dating. Height disadvantage processed correctly teaches a framework applicable everywhere. Optimization within constraints beats complaint about constraints every time. The shorter man who spends 10 years maximizing controllable factors builds a life. The shorter man who spends 10 years resenting height disadvantage remains stuck. Same starting point, different destination. The difference isn't the height, it's the response. The advantages of being underestimated deserve mention. Tall men face high expectations. They're assumed competent until proven otherwise. This creates pressure and vulnerability. Every failure to meet the assumed capability registers as disappointment. The bar starts high because the height placed it there. Shorter men face low expectations. They're underestimated routinely. This creates opportunity. Every demonstration of capability produces surprise. Every success exceeds what was predicted. The bar starts low because the height placed it there. And low bars are easier to clear impressively. Exceeding expectations produces outsized credit. The short man who demonstrates extraordinary competence, success, or capability gets extra recognition precisely because it wasn't expected. The tall man demonstrating equivalent capability merely confirms assumptions. The shorter man exceeding assumptions creates memorable impact. This dynamic applies in professional contexts, social contexts, and eventually romantic contexts. The woman who expected little based on height and encountered much becomes intrigued in ways that confirming expectations never produces. Surprise creates engagement. The underestimated man who delivers more than expected creates valuable surprise. The competitive strategy crystallizes into clear priorities. First priority: physical optimization. Build the physique that maximizes your frame. Make the body you have as impressive as genetics and effort can make it. This is high-return investment that compounds over time. Second priority: financial development. Build income and wealth that shift how you're perceived. Money talks in ways that create space for other qualities to be heard. This takes longer but produces permanent change in competitive position. Third priority: social skill refinement. Develop the personality, humor, confidence, and presence that create attraction independent of height. These skills can be learned. They improve with practice. They operate in the actual interaction where height has already been observed and accepted. Fourth priority: strategic positioning. Choose environments, approaches, and dating channels that minimize height disadvantage. Meet people through contexts where other qualities register first. Compete on battlefields that favor your strengths. Fifth priority: psychological maintenance. Process the unfairness without becoming bitter. Accept the disadvantage without internalizing inferiority. Build genuine confidence from genuine achievement. Avoid the communities and content that validate hopelessness. The tall man doesn't need this strategy. He can coast on genetic luck. You cannot coast. This difference is unfair. It's also unchangeable. What can be changed is what you do with the situation you're in. And what you do determines outcomes far more than the starting conditions you didn't choose. Success stories exist everywhere. Shorter men with impressive partners. Shorter men with successful careers. Shorter men with social status that their height shouldn't permit. These examples don't eliminate the average disadvantage. They demonstrate that averages aren't destinies. Individual outcomes vary. You can be the variance. These successful shorter men share common characteristics. They've stopped complaining. They've maximized what they can maximize. They've developed qualities that height can't create. An absence of height can't eliminate. They've processed the disadvantage into fuel rather than poison. They've built lives that make height a footnote rather than a headline. The path is harder than the path tall men walk. Acknowledging this is honest. But harder paths have been walked successfully by millions. The difficulty doesn't equal impossibility. It equals difficulty. And difficulty is navigable by anyone willing to pay the costs navigation requires. The final frame requires direct statement. Height matters in dating. The bias is real, substantial, and unlikely to disappear. Shorter men face genuine disadvantage that no mindset trick eliminates. This is truth. Height isn't everything. Other factors influence outcomes. Those factors are controllable. Optimization of controllable factors can compensate substantially for height disadvantage. Many shorter men have succeeded. This is also truth. Both truths coexist: the disadvantage and the path through it, the obstacle and the strategies for navigating it. Holding both simultaneously without minimizing either produces accurate assessment from which effective action follows. Complaining about height produces nothing except more misery for the complainer. Acting on controllable factors produces actual change and actual outcomes. The choice between these paths is made daily. Every day spent complaining is a day not spent building. Every day spent building is progress toward the life that makes height less central. The world doesn't owe you the height you wish you had. It's not going to suddenly discover that its preferences were wrong and recalibrate to give shorter men fair treatment. The bias persists because it reflects something in human psychology that arguments don't change. Waiting for fairness means waiting forever. Taking action means taking control of what you can control. Building the body, building the wealth, building the skills, building the life. These don't require anyone's permission. They don't require the bias to disappear. They just require you to do them regardless of whether the playing field is level. The playing field isn't level. Never was. Never will be. But games are one-on-one unlevel fields constantly by players who understood the terrain, adapted their strategy, and executed with excellence despite disadvantage. The question isn't whether the field is fair. The question is what you're going to do on the field that exists. Height matters. Height isn't everything. Both statements are true. The response those truths demand is clear. Accept what cannot be changed. Maximize what can be changed. Build a life that makes the unchosen characteristic one small part of a much larger picture. That picture is in your hands to create. The height is fixed. Everything else is variable, and everything else adds up to more than the height alone. More content exists on maximizing controllable factors, building the qualities that transcend physical characteristics, and developing the psychology that produces results despite structural disadvantage. For those who've succeeded despite height disadvantage, share your path. What worked? What didn't? What would you tell yourself at the beginning? Your experience helps those still figuring out how to navigate the terrain you've already crossed. Height matters. So does what you do about it. One you can't control. The other you can focus accordingly. So, what are your thoughts on today's topic? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel Psychological Depth so you won't miss any of our upcoming posts. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.